Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Pleased so many of you could join us on this Saturday afternoon. I suppose many of you know me. I'm Cal. I head the teaching and training function with Burlington. And with me is my colleague, Mina, who will be administering. Say a quick hello, Mina. Okay, she'll be administrating the Q&A and also monitoring the chat. Okay. Just a couple of house rules. If you could not raise your hand because there's hundreds of participants and we keep having to lower the hands, it's not feasible for us to look at that all the time. So that would help us. If you have any questions, feel free to put in the Q&A. If you put it in the chat, it will perhaps get lost a little bit because I will be asking for some responses to certain questions. So do put it in the Q&A. And also, if you want a recording of this, it's available on our YouTube channel. After the session, it'll be an hour or two. So do look at Burlington's YouTube channel and you'll find that as well. Okay, so let's get started then. We have Phonetics Foundations with us today. So what are we going to do? We're going to do various things. Obviously, we're going to look at the sound system in English, but we'll also look at some activities and a range of activities that we can do across grades. So we'll do things like chants. We'll end the session with some limericks. We'll look at aspects of pronunciation and phonetics, things like linking. And hopefully we'll show you some activities that you can do across all grades from pre-primary all the way up to grades 8+. That's something like the sound code grid. We've only got an hour, so it is a foundation in phonetics. So we can't cover everything, but what we will be focusing on is the IPA. The IPA being the International Phonetic Alphabet. And just a couple of points before we get going on that. I thought it would be interesting to say where it came from. And all it means is an alphabetic system of notation. And the reason I put this up is because it originated with Latin and German script. And so if you're wondering sometimes, where do these symbols come from? That's the background to some of those symbols, because it's not a Romanized alphabet purely. There are symbols that come from other scripts as well. It's been around for quite a long time. So you find in Western countries, for example, when I did my teacher training and in schools, you find a lot of these charts in old classrooms. In India and the subcontinent, you don't notice it in as many schools, but a lot of the international schools do have these charts up in every classroom. So when we're looking at the IPA, there's a couple of terms that we need to be familiar with. The first one is a phoneme. And if we're doing the definition of a phoneme, in its simplest form, it's just a unit of sound that will distinguish one word from another and one unit of that word from another in a particular language. So by and large, you can just say it's the smallest unit of sound of a letter. And parallel to that, we have something called a grapheme, which just is the written version of the phoneme. And if we just explore that in a little bit more detail here, if we put some sounds up, and you can see on the screen, there are 4 distinct sounds. So that I'm saying those are the smallest units of sound in a particular word. So if we do a phoneme, first of all, you say it. So it's very oral, but you can also hear it. The one thing you can't do is see it. And that's where the grapheme comes in. So if I represent those 4 sounds, okay, in a visual text format, you can see the word spoon here. Now you can see 3 of the sounds, they correspond to one particular letter of that, but the third one, it actually corresponds to a couple of letters. And that's the difference between when we're looking at an alphabet and the letters in an alphabet and graphemes. So remember, graphemes are just the physical representation, the visual representation, because you can see it, of phonemes, and phonemes are the sounds. And that's what we've got to get across all the time when we're dealing with phonetics. We're talking about sounds. We're not talking about letters per se. So if we just move it on and we're saying we're talking about sound, so we've got to differentiate between the 26 letters of the alphabet and the sounds that they represent. So if we just look at the sounds themselves, then we can say we have 44 sounds in the English language. And it's its base form, it's split up into vowel sounds and consonant sounds. Now, remember, I keep saying sounds, so we're not talking about the letters, we're not talking about the alphabets, we're talking about 20 vowel sounds and 24 consonant sounds. When we're teaching phonetics, you can further subdivide it in a variety of ways. So for vowels, the easiest way to divide it further is to do monophthongs, which are single vowel sounds, as the name indicates with that prefix, and diphthongs, which is more than one. With consonants, again, if we're teaching, okay, so it's not to say we're doing it for reading purposes. If we're teaching pronunciation, the easiest way to do it is to split it into voiced and voiceless consonants. And I'll come back to those two terms in a little while to explain what exactly they mean. A further subdivision can be done with the single vowel sounds. We have 5 of them that are long vowel sounds and 7 of them that are short vowel sounds. Okay. If we look at the consonant side, we said we can split into voice and voiceless. There are certain other things you can do if you wish, and it's not a hard and fast rule. So for example, you could split the consonants into the 21 single consonants, and these represent actually just 20 different sounds, because a couple of them, the k, as in kit, and k as in cat, they're the same sound. You also have 5 additional consonant sounds, and these are represented by pairs of letters. So you can see these 5 listed here, the sh in the ship, the th as in thumb, and then the harder one, the th as in this, the ch as in chicken, and the which is the end of the continuous forms or nouns like ring, or even a verb if it's to ring as well. Okay, those are called consonant pairs because you're grouping consonants together and they're represented by a pair of letters. And in English, you also have 3 nasal sounds, and all a nasal sound is the air movement is blocked and it comes out through your nose. So it doesn't leave the mouth and it has to leave somehow, so it leaves through the nose itself. And we have 3 of those. Okay. Things like nose is an example of one, mouth, and ring. Another way to subdivide consonant sounds if you're teaching is to do stop sounds and continuant sounds. Now with stop sounds, all that means is that the airflow stops at some point, and they're generally quick and quiet sounds. So there's a sharp ending and the airflow stops abruptly. So if you try to say the top list that you can see in front of you, you will find that the airflow stops quite abruptly. Contrast that with the bottom row of continuant sounds. We call these long and loud because often you can hold a lot of these sounds for at least 2 seconds. And again, have a go at saying some of those, and you'll find that you can extend how long you say those for. So if we're teaching, we'll go back to phonemes then. We said they can be split into consonants and vowels. And we said consonants you can have voiced and unvoiced, and vowels you can have single vowels, monophthongs, or dual vowels, which are diphthongs. You can also subdivide the single vowels into short and long. So far, we've just looked at sounds, okay? But in the chat box, can anybody tell me what I mean by this phrase? I put suprasegmental features. So do any of you know, what do you understand by the word suprasegmental features, and what is it to do with pronunciation? Okay, Isungari, you say sounds. Okay, a little bit more than sounds. What aspects of pronunciation are we talking about with suprasegmental features? Let's give it 10, 15 more seconds. Okay, the emphasis on a particular syllable or word, that's a good point. How they are divided. Aspects of speech, I don't quite follow what you're saying. Okay, a couple of people have put things like intonation and stress. So well done to those people. Essentially, that's what we mean. It's when we put the sounds together and formulate words. And when we put words together, then we formulate phrases and sentences. And in doing that, this is where aspects of intonation, stress, and sentence stress comes in. We can only do sentence stress if we put words together, made phrases, and made sentences themselves. So that's the other side of it as well. The suprasegmental just means extra things added together in features of pronunciation. So let's look at the phonemic chart itself. Okay, now, as I said, when I did my teacher training, my teaching, let's say in Western countries, this is standard in most of the classrooms. In India, it's not as standard as it is elsewhere. And so it's up to you whether you find it beneficial or not. What I would say is that if you're doing pronunciation focused on, let's say, reading and recognizing text, then perhaps you don't need to do the phonemic system like I'm going to show now. But if you're going to concentrate on all the four skills, especially listening and speaking, I think this will help you quite a lot. So on the face of it, it looks quite complicated, but we can break it down into distinct areas. So you can see 12 monophthongs here. And essentially monophthongs, as we said, they're single unchanging vowel sounds in a particular syllable. So if you look at the words that you can see, every one of those words highlighted, except for one, just has a single syllable to that. So when we're saying the vowel sound in these, it remains constant, okay, throughout saying something. So if we say a word like cat and concentrate on the vowel sound there, the R does not change. Contrast that with the diphthongs, okay, so we call these as opposed to simple, complex vowel sounds, because these vowel sounds begin as one vowel and then transition and glide into another, and hence you have a couple of symbols there. So in this case, the quality of the vowel sound changes within the same syllable. And if we have a word like, let's say, coin, it starts off as an O and glides into an E, and we put those two things together. So if we're looking at monophthongs and diphthongs, we could say that monophthongs are single vowel sounds that are a lot simpler than the diphthongs, for the simple reason that the mouth position doesn't change. So if you have a go at saying any of those words on the monophthong side, you'll notice your mouth position does not change. If you say a word like father, the R part of that does not change. Whereas the diphthongs, it means there's a change in mouth position. So if I say a word like loud and concentrate on the vowel in the middle, the ow, I'm doing two movements in my mouth. So consequently, some of the first sounds learned by kids are actually monophthongs because they're simpler to actually do. And if you have a lot of textbooks, especially in the early years, even our early years textbooks, you'll see that the single vowel sounds are done predominantly at the beginning of a term. The complex ones, they vary across languages, but also dialects. So even though I'm a native speaker of English, my dialect in Northern England is different from somebody who's in the South, is different from somebody who's in the West or North in Scotland. So what this does is adds a richness and a lot of variation to the way people speak. It also, these two things affects the rhythm and intonation, and both of these are essential components in a phonetic system. So the monophthongs essentially add the clarity and simplicity in speech, whereas the diphthongs, they make distinct sounds and they add that element of fluidity. So often if you're listening to a native speaker, it seems like we're speaking up and down, singing along. We're just using these monophthongs and diphthongs to especially add variety to what our speech is. The third category, we have the consonant sounds. So remember, there are 24 of those. And I said they can be split into voiced and unvoiced sounds. So I've highlighted the voice sounds, and you can see there are 15 of those. Okay, and the remaining 9 are the unvoiced sounds. So what does voice sounds mean? Essentially, they're where your vocal folds, or some people call them vocal cords, vibrate. Okay? Now, these cords are located in your larynx, which is the hollow tube in the middle of your neck. And it makes it possible to make sound. So often they're called the voice box. Now, an easy way for you to teach students, are they voicing something, is just to get your hand and put it round your neck at the top and just press it upwards slightly. Then have a go at saying a voiced and unvoiced pairing. So if you say v, 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 you can feel a vibration when you do the v, but you can't feel a vibration when it's the f. Similar with zoo, z, 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 z. It's the same sound, but with the z, your vocal cords, okay, there's a vibration because the air passes through it as it narrows the vocal folds. So as I said, for students to differentiate, just get your hand, put it around the top of your neck and press up. And if they feel a vibration, that means it's a voice sound. Obviously, if they're not feeling the vibration and they're pronouncing something that should be, that's your concept check question. Can you feel a vibration or not? Now, the phonemic chart was quite complicated there, so you can simplify it for, let's say, grades 2 and below. And it's got the same, if you like, headings of consonant sounds, vowel sounds, and diphthongs. But what you can add is maybe an image, rather than just do the word, rather than just do the phonemic script, just add an image as well. And so a lot of schools tend to do this to make it easier and more accessible for students to pick up on that. One thing we should highlight also is to say something about phonics, okay? Because I hear this word a lot, and you notice I've titled my webinar Phonetics. Okay, so to me, phonics, it's a method of teaching people to read by correlating the sounds, okay, with different symbols. And in its simplest form, from the terms we've used so far, I'd say it's the study of the relationship between phonemes, which is the sound system, and the textual representation of that, which are the graphemes. So it's not the letters and the phonemes, but the graphemes and the phonemes. So if you follow this, and if you want to emphasize, let's say, reading, okay, you might start off with the alphabet vowels and then do the corresponding sounds. So the 5 alphabet vowels and the corresponding sounds, and then move on to consonants, okay, with the alphabet, the letters, and then move on to the corresponding sounds. And then slowly you'll build up by doing combinations of these consonants and vowels, and that's where you get these little symbols of CV, and then migrate to CVCC. And at that point, you may do the phonemes and the graphemes as well. So usually if you're focusing on phonics, it's with the mindset that I'm going to be teaching people to read first of all, rather than do the speaking and listening. If you want to do the speaking and listening, that's where the phonetic system comes into its own. And if you are doing the phonics side of that, there are a couple of little things that you may have to highlight quite early on. So the first one is the consonant digraphs, we call them. And all that means is the combination of 2 consonant letters. And they form a single consonant sound, i.e. a phoneme. So you can see that, especially on the left-hand side there. So we've got the S and H, and it formulates the phoneme sh. The C and H, the ch. Okay, the th, and the as well. So these may produce a unique sound that if you write the letter independently, it won't form on its own. So if we take the first example, the S and H, if you said shoe, if you put the S and H on its own, it would not formulate that phoneme sh. Okay, so we've combined them. The other thing it could also do, it could result in a letter becoming silent and redundant. So we have a lot of that with WH words. So if we look at the WH digraph there, if we say things like what, why, you don't hear the H at all. So these are quite important for beginner readers to recognize. And what I've shown on the slide are some of the common ones that you can have. Okay. But let's get back to the phonetic system there. So we've earlier grouped it into single vowel sounds, double vowel sounds, and also consonants. You can further subdivide it if you're thinking about teaching it. And we can have 5 groupings here. So we can have a grouping of long vowel sounds, and you see the grouping there. Then we have the remaining single vowel sounds. Okay, so in total, you have the 12 single vowel sounds there. We can add in the diphthongs, the 8 of those. And then with the consonants, we compare them. Okay, so you can see 8 sets, and there's 16 consonant sounds there. And the only difference is what we said earlier, the voicing. So if you do each one of these in turn, the p, everything is the same with your mouth and the airflow. The only difference is the vocal cords. Same with t, d. Okay, the ch, the sh, okay, j, the k, g, f, v, th, v, s, s, and the sh, j. All the sounds are exactly the same except for the voicing. So those can be paired off. And that leaves you with the remaining consonants, which are quite straightforward, except perhaps the last one, where it looks like the alphabetic letter J, but it's actually pronounced a Y, okay, for that. So when we're doing our learning, if you're doing linguistics and things, you usually group them into these 5 categories and these 5 areas. How do you go about teaching it? It's any way you want to do it. Okay, so I'll give you one example. This is what I did when I was doing my courses. We first of all did the consonant sounds because a lot of them were familiar with the alphabetic letters, and they went in pairs as well. We then moved on to the remaining consonant sounds. Then we added the long vowel sounds, which were easy to remember because of the 2 dots after each of those symbols. So we recognize, you had to elongate, stretch that particular vowel sound. We had the remaining single vowel sounds. And then we had the diphthongs, where we combined those vowel sounds together. Okay. Now, if we look at these 5 on the chat box, can you just tell me which do you think students would find hardest to replicate? Would it be the consonants, the unvoiced and voiced? Would it be the other consonants? Would it be the long vowel sounds, the other vowel sounds, or the diphthongs? Okay, so if I shall use say, so most people are saying diphthongs. Gordas, you've said vowel sounds. Diphthongs and unvoiced sounds. Yeah, I think most people are saying those diphthongs. And from experience, that is correct, especially if you're teaching people where English is not their first language. Okay, so often what people do, if they're going to focus on teaching this with a view to doing listening and speaking especially, as opposed to reading, they tend to do this in reverse. So they'll start off with the diphthongs, then go to the long vowel sounds, the vowel sounds, and then the consonants. But there's no hard and fast rule. Every teacher knows their group better than anybody else. So you just pick and choose where are the errors being made. But most of the errors will be made on those diphthongs, as most people have said in the chat box. Okay, so couple of things before we come into some activities and practice things. What you should raise, whether you're focusing on reading and the recognition of that, or indeed speaking, is that what we call a bossy R. So if you're doing those single vowel sounds and the elongated ones as well, where you stretch them, a lot of people who are not familiar with the phonetic alphabet, if they see a word like car, they'll pronounce the R. See a word like jerk, they will pronounce the R, fork, port. But in reality, in English, we don't actually say the R. It's a silent R because we use these long vowel sounds, okay, to actually pronounce the middle vowel in these particular words. So that's one good thing to point out, especially if you're teaching reading and you're doing read alouds in essence. Another important aspect is to do something called the schwa. So I put some arrows there. On the chat box, you've noticed I've put 5 arrows and they connect to a little dash. Okay, can you tell me on the chat box what this dash represents? If you look these words up in a dictionary, for example, we'll see these dashes. So what do these dashes represent when they're related to a word? Okay, Lydia, Dorleen, well done. Divya, yeah. Yeah, so quite a few people. You've put great. Okay, yes, I think most people have got that. It's actually the word stress. Okay, so you see these words that I've put there, they've all got 2 or more syllables in there. Balloon, camel, president, freedom, album. Because they've got more than 1 syllable, then one of those syllables is stressed, and you can tell by looking it up in a dictionary, and you'll see that little dash mark. So if one of the syllables is stressed, that means the others are not stressed as much, and that's where the schwa comes into its own. Okay. So what is the schwa? It's the unstressed vowel in a particular word. Okay. Because it's unstressed, some people call it the lazy vowel because your mouth barely has to do anything to make that sound. Okay, and because it's the unstressed vowel, this is the most common sound in the English language. And you have to teach this quite early. So if you look at the third word, president, you can tell it's got 3 syllables. And if we're saying the stress is on the first syllable, the pre part of it, then that means that vowel in that particular syllable has to be clear. Okay, so we would say N, clear. And because that's clear, the others have to be de-stressed. So we don't say president. Okay, the C and the dent have to be de-stressed. So it's president. And we say okay, E. So that's an unstressed vowel. And that's why it's the most common sound in the English language. Any word with 2 or more syllables, one of the syllables will be stressed, the others will be de-stressed. So let's move on to when we combine the sounds now. And there are 3 golden rules. And this is where people say to somebody like me, you're speaking quickly. But in reality, we're not speaking quickly. We're just doing a little thing called linking our words together. So there are 3 rules for linking. So the first rule is if a word ends in a vowel sound and the start of the next word starts with a vowel sound, then we tend to combine them together. So an example of this, when you combine them, it will produce these particular sounds. Okay, E and Y, O and L. Let's do it with a couple of examples. So if you all have a go at saying this to yourself and say Bayof, and combine those 2 words, because A in the bay is a vowel sound at the end of that word, and the O of is a vowel sound at the beginning of the next one. So we combine the 2. We don't say bay of. And if you slow it down, okay, it sounds like a Y in the middle of that, where that dash is. And if you do see it, again, a vowel sound at the end and a vowel at the beginning of the next word, so we're combining them together. And it sounds like we've put an extra E in there, see it. Okay, so I hope you're doing it along with me. Okay, I know your mics are off, but I hope you're doing it. And similarly with the bottom set, go ahead. Okay, go ahead. It sounds like there's an extra O in there. Now or never, now or. It almost sounds like one word because we're linking it. So that's the first rule of linking. The second rule is if a word ends in a consonant sound, and the start of the next word is a vowel sound. And with these rules, unless there's some punctuation, they're valid for, let's say, 90 to 95% of times when you're speaking. So if you have a go at these, sit on, okay, so the first word ends in a consonant sound, the next word starts with a vowel, so we're linking it, sit on, catch it, big apple. The third one is where the word ends in a consonant sound and the start of the next word is actually the same sound or a similar sound. And that's where the phonetics come in, because there are a lot of sounds that are very similar in your mouth. You don't need hardly any mouth movement. So if we have a look at these examples, on the top line, let's sit, the S of let's and sit, it's the same sound. So we would link that. Similar to sit together, the T is the same sound. So let's sit together. We just link it all in one. Same with the next one, huge, giant, the j, the j of huge and the j of giant, it's the same sound. But if you look at the bottom row, they're slightly different sounds, but they're very similar if you think about what's happening in your mouth. So does she, it's a fluid movement in your mouth of the airflow. So we would link that together again. At the and red table, although they're not exactly the same sound, they're close enough. So native speakers would naturally link all these things together. And a good way to practice this is to just get a few lines of text. So you can see 6, 7 sentences here, a little bit of dialogue there. Can you, in the chat box, if you have time, or just look at it and just read it to yourself, and bearing in mind those 3 rules, which words would you link together? Okay. If you fancy putting it in the chat box, great. Otherwise, I'll give you about 30 seconds just to do it in your head. And think about and just tell me which words in this, based on those 3 rules, would you link together? Mina, I hope you're doing it as well.
Yes, Cal, I'm also trying.
I think that people just let people do it another 20 seconds. I could show the answers on the YouTube channel, but I'll show the answers now in a minute.
There's a
So
response
if you want to,
on chat.
yeah, that's I just thought it's a bit too much to do on that, so I thought let them just do it in their head. Yeah, quite a few have got that, so it's a good practice to do there. Okay, if you've got your phones with you or screen captures, I'm just going to put the answers up and then just have a go at it afterwards. Okay, so you should get these that are linked. Okay, and all these that you see highlighted in red follow one of the 3 rules that you can see on the left-hand side. Okay, so just take a quick screen capture of that or look at our YouTube channel later and get it. And again, you can choose any paragraph. Okay, so again, I've just chosen a little bit of dialogue there. Again, maybe take a little photograph of this or screen capture it. And then I'll put the answers up on the next part. Okay, and just have a go at it yourself after the session, a little bit of homework, and see how close you came to it. Okay, so this is important to actually teach students linking, because if they do this, when they're doing the read alouds or repeating some text, or they're just speaking, but importantly also listening to some audio, when they're thinking, I don't understand or don't recognize that word, you could get the transcript and just say to them, can you actually figure out if things are linked? Okay, so have a little go at that. Okay, so on the chat box, you can see an image on the screen. Can you just write down, what do you see on the screen? What's it an image of? Okay, an element of food. Yeah. We've got the burgers. Okay, I don't think they're bees, but I think a lot of people have put flies. Okay, so essentially, you know, there's burger and flies. Okay, what's the pronunciation error here? Obviously, it should be burger and fries. So if you go to McDonald's or somewhere or Burger King and order this, okay, I don't think they'll issue with flies. So what's the pronunciation error here? It's the R and L sound. That's what they've got problems with. So the next stage is, how do we correct errors? We've done the phonemes, we've done the sounds, we've split them into vowel sounds, single and dual ones, we split them into consonants, voiced and unvoiced. But once we've identified there's an error, what can we do with it? Okay. So I asked some people who were there early right at the start, if you've got a pen and paper handy, okay, I'm just going to do some tongue twisters. Okay, I'll just do 3 or 4 of them. I'll play each one 3 times. Okay, can you quickly write down on your piece of paper what the tongue twister is? Okay, so let's go for this one. I'll just do them at random.
Top chopstick shops stock top chopsticks. Top chopstick shops stock top chopsticks. Top chopstick shops stock top chopsticks.
Okay, so let's do one more.
Vincent vowed vengeance very vehemently. Vincent vowed vengeance very vehemently. Vincent vowed vengeance very vehemently.
Let's do one last one.
Lesser leather never weathered wetter weather better. Lesser leather never weathered wetter weather better. Lesser leather never weathered wetter weather.
Oh, I think I cut that off by putting up the chats. I think a few people are putting it on the chat, but it's okay if you just write it down alongside.
Weather
Okay?
better.
You can check your answers. Okay, I think number 11 was one of them. Okay, I think number 16 was one of them. And I think the last one was number 14. Now, why do we do tongue twisters? And what's it got to do with pronunciation? Essentially, if we had that burger and flies, we would do a tongue twister like number 2, okay, or perhaps number 5. Because what we have here is a replication of the problem sound. And that's where tongue twisters come into their own. But when you're doing them, some are good to do, some are not so good to do. Okay, so which ones out of these are good and which are not so good? Essentially, you don't want to turn it into a memory test. So a lot of the ones, let's say from 11 onwards, you would not really do for pronunciation teaching because it's more of a memory test. Okay, they might remember 3-4 words and then they'll just forget. And you'll notice when I did it, I played each one 3 times. So the better ones are ones like number 10, 2 or 5 or 7 or 9. They only have 3, 4, 5 words, but the target sound is within the word. Okay, so remember that if you try to do those tongue twisters. So first of all, you identify the problem sound. Okay, what are they replicating it? What are they replacing it with? And then you can come up with a tongue twister for a little bit of practice. Then what we've got to do is distinguish the sounds and produce them. So do they hear it incorrectly? Or are they just saying it incorrectly? So a good one to do is a binary code system. So if I allocate 2 numbers, number 1 to a word like flies, and number 2 to a word like fries, I will just say to the students, can you tell me which number am I spelling? And I would just say those 2 words. So for example, if I said fries, flies, I'm doing the number 2, 1, okay, 21. If I say flies, flies, I'm doing the number 11. Okay, so that distinguishes, have they got the ability to recognize what the sound is? And then are they just producing it incorrectly? Or do they not recognize the sound at all? So I'm going to do a 4-digit number with these 2 words here. In the chat box, tell me which 4-digit number have I done? Okay, so fries, flies, flies, fries. So put in the chat box, which 4-digit number did I do? Okay. I think about 10% only have got that one. So was it my pronunciation that was incorrect? Okay. Or was it your receptive skills? Okay. If you got 2112, that was correct. A lot of you put 2121 as well. But that's the first stage. So get the pair that's incorrect and work with that to start off with. The next stage, okay, is you have to deal with the problem. So essentially the problems occur because airflow comes up, okay, from your diaphragm, goes through your larynx, and then it comes out. We found there are 3 nasal sounds, so it will come out of your nose. Otherwise, it will be out of the mouth. So can you tell me on the chat box, what bits in your body, essentially your throat and your mouth area, affect the airflow coming out? Okay, and a good way to show students is to do a side view of a face. So what bits interfere with the airflow coming out of your mouth? Okay, which bits in your mouth? Okay, Buja, you've got that one correct. Well done. Shiny, good. Lydia, good, good, good. I don't know about your last one, Lydia. Okay, I suppose it could. Sure. Yeah. Sure. I don't quite understand what rat. Okay, yeah. Good. Okay. Okay, so quite a few have got that. Essentially, there's about 4 or 5 things that you should concentrate on, because these are the things that will affect students when they're mispronouncing things. Okay, so a lot of people did say the voice box, which is good. You've also got the teeth. Okay, you've got the lips, which very few people said. The tongue, which you can see on the lower diagram there. But also remember things like the roof of your mouth, because a lot of it is what's the relationship between things like the tongue and the roof of your mouth. Where does the tongue touch the roof of your mouth? Is it in the middle? Is it just behind the teeth? Does it touch the teeth? These are the interrelationships that we have on this. So all these things that affect airflow coming out are called articulators, simply because they articulate the sounds, okay, and they influence the sounds coming out of that. So a good way to practice and get students to correct things is to do something called a sound code grid, okay? Now, if you look at this, all I've done is put the 26 letters of the alphabet in a grid. You can see there are essentially 6 full rows with 4 letters on each row, and then the Y and the Z at the end. So each week you take a line, okay, of the sound grid once you identify what the problem area is, and slowly build up. Okay, so week 2 you add another line, week 3 you add another line, etc., etc. And what you do is you allocate the problem words that the students have, and if you can, do 1-syllable words, sometimes 2-syllable words. So let's say the student, in this case, has a problem with the L and R, with that fries and flies. So I've put words in this grid that replicate those sounds or contain those sounds. So rock, lock, fries, and rip. I've done it according to a letter. And what I would say to the students is, I'm going to spell a 3-letter word. Can you tell me what the word is? But I will say the actual words themselves. So for example, and I'll say each word 3 times. Okay, so if I said fries, 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 the letter I'm looking at is the letter C. If I then say rock, 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 the letter I'm looking at is A. And if I say low, 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 the letter I'm looking at is B. So there I spelt the word cab, C-A-B. Okay. So let's have a go at one. I'm going to spell a 3-letter word. Can you, in the chat box, put what the word is I'm spelling? And remember, I'll say each word 3 times for each letter. So let's have a go. Low, 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 rock, 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 rip, rip, rip. So which 3-letter word did I spell? Yes, I think, okay, the majority, yes. Everybody except 2 people got that one. Good. Following week, just add another row. Okay, so I'm going to add another row. So week 2, I've added another line. Now I've got more words to play with. But as you add rows, you start adding words that are called minimal pairs. So if you look at the letter B, we've got low. If you look at the letter F, we've got row. The only difference is one sound between them. And that is what's called a minimal pair, rather like fries and flies. And again, you can say to the students, I'm going to spell, okay, let's do a 4-letter word this time. Okay, and again, in the chat box, tell me which word am I spelling. So pilot, 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 play, 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 rock, 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 rip, rip, rip. So which word did I spell there? Yeah, okay, so you got the idea. Okay, good. Again, majority. Remember, so you spell out the words, okay, and don't do more than 5-letter words. So each week you keep adding a particular line, okay, and as you add the lines, you start doing those minimal pairs. So we have lock in J, rock in A, rip in D, okay, lip in I, and as I said earlier, low, row, okay. And as we go throughout, after 6-7 weeks, you've got a full grid. Okay, so this is a good way for students to practice their problem sound and hopefully correct it as well. Obviously, you can do it the other way. Okay, the student can say, okay, can you spell the word head? Okay, and then the other student can do it in reverse and say the actual words. So as the course progresses, you'll find different students have different problem areas. Okay, this one is between sh and ch. The student has a problem with that. So we've loaded the grid with lots of words like that. And you'll notice a lot of the words are one syllable or maybe two syllables in a couple of cases, because we want to concentrate on the sound. This is between p and b. Okay, this is the long and short vowel. Okay, so e and I. Okay, the student has a problem with that. And then by the end of a particular term, you can do a general grid, okay, with all the problem sounds that a particular student has. And they're quick 5-minute exercises wherein they can practice, okay, these different things. So just to summarize this, deal with one sound problem at a time. And doing a tongue twister allows you to be clear what that sound is. Think of a minimal pair like flies and fries, where only the target sound is different. Model the words yourself because you are the person that can pronounce them. Don't get another student to do it. And do it 2 or 3 times in the early days so they have a good model. Do everybody together, orally drill the words. Okay, because remember, some people can't pronounce it, but if they hear it from the people next to them, they've got a better chance of doing that. And then you can do that binary code number, okay, by saying 1, 2, and doing new numbers with that, and ask them to tell you which number you're doing, okay? At the end of the day, what you should do is when you start, after a few days, you should record your student and just do a brief 20-second recording. So I've got a recording of one of my students. I'm just going to play it briefly. And you just think to yourself, what are the problem areas that I'm going to focus on with this student?
My favorite fruit is mango. I just love mango of all shapes and sizes, big, small, yellow, red, green. In fact, when I was little, I used to climb a mango tree. You can make so many things with mango: squash, juice, mango shake, jam, pickle. Mangoes are too good. I can go on and on eating mango. I always buy lots of mango every summer.
Okay, so that was a recording of one of my students. It's only 20 seconds or so. Okay, now she's got numerous problems, numerous errors that cropped up there. So it's up to me as a teacher, what am I going to target? Okay, was it a consonant sound that she kept replicating incorrectly? Most of them were to do with the diphthongs there. Okay, and she didn't stress vowels. So that's a good idea for you to do. Just record students individually and think about how can I tackle those particular ones. Now, in order to help you, okay, there are lots of apps there, and we've done cutaway faces and we've done the sounds as well. Okay. So remember, on our own systems, if you've got the Burlington apps with you, we have that pronunciation plus tool. Okay, and this does a lot of it for you. So we've got those word lists in there, and then we have the words themselves.
Acupuncture.
And then the student can press the microphone to actually replicate the word. Okay, and we've also added the sentences at the bottom. And that helps us to do things like the word and sentence stress.
Acupuncture has been used for ages to reduce stress.
Okay, so students have a lot of practice on those. And once the main error has been identified by our AI system, okay, in this case, it could be the first sound. And remember, you can play back what the student has recorded. Then it goes on to correction. Okay, so Amy, our avatar, will show you this is what you're doing incorrect. This is what you should be doing. And again, it replicates things like the articulators and the airflow and what's gone wrong and what should be done.
You are saying w, as in wet, instead of v, as in vet. You are closing your lips and then opening your mouth. To say the sound v, put your lower lip beneath your upper teeth and let the air flow without blocking it.
So essentially, she's showing you the different ways to actually correct it. And then the student has the listening, okay, where they have a go. So the receptive skill, is it a problem with the listening side of things?
Advice.
And if they get it correct, they know straight away it's correct.
Wake.
And obviously, if they get it incorrect, they also know, we've got it.
Wheel. Vest.
Okay, and once they've done enough, it will go on to the next section. Once they've done enough correct answers, and they can get that from the bottom of the screen, and then they do the productive side. Okay, once again, they'll hear something.
Vote.
And then they replicate it by pressing the microphone. So remember, on the Burlington app itself, there's a lot of things that they can practice themselves. And as you do the course, you have lots of these word lists. So what's the ultimate aim? Is the student understandable? It's not a case of speaking like, for example, a native speaker, because we all have accents, different dialects. If I speak French, I would not speak it like a French person. But am I understandable? Is the stress placed correctly in all the words? And when we do those full sentences, that's where sentence level stress comes into its own. And essentially, we're thinking about the rhythm. Okay, are there any hesitations, repetitions, false starts? Are they linking things together? So there's lots of things that we can do when we're looking at this. So what about some other activities that we can do for different age groups? So just to finish off at the end, you can do lots of things like chants. Okay, so chants are good because they have beats. So if you do a 4 beats, and I do a, apple, a, apple. A is for apple, oh so sweet. A is for apple, a tasty treat. A, apple. They'll get away from looking at the 3rd and 4th line, which has a lot of words in there. But if we do things like we said earlier about linking, okay, and if we do it according to a regular beat, then they'll naturally say it in a fluent manner. And the regular beat is important, and we'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. If they have problem words, you can do something like back to the board, put the student at the front with their back to the board, put the particular word they have problems with, and get the rest of the class to elicit this particular word from the student. So here it could be a problem with the diphthong. It could be the consonant cluster that they have in there where the consonants come together. It could be the word stress. In this one, they may not be doing the word stress correctly and saying 2 full clear vowel sounds in both the syllables instead of emphasizing one and de-emphasizing the other. This could be the voicing of the verb. Okay, it could be many, many, many different things. Another good thing to do with young learners is a shouting dictation. So in this case, you line the students up, you line them up at least 2 meters apart, give one set a set of words. So students on the left-hand side, we call them student A, you give them a set of words, and students on the other side, give them another set of words. So this is all about looking at the articulators that they're visible. So things like your lips and the teeth. Okay, so if they mouth these words instead of saying them, so if they just go, so I'm just mouthing the word, I'm not actually saying the word, the person opposite has to figure out what that word is. And you can have a lot of fun with this because young learners, when you go to those nursery rhymes and little songs, you can actually do an information gap where one student has half of it, the other student has the other half of it, and they just mouth it to each other without actually saying it out loud. And then they formulate the whole thing after that. As you go up the grades, you can start adding more about the language, okay? So again, this keeps a regular beat. So they get away from looking at the 3rd line has a lot more words than the first couple of lines, and the last line has less words. If you keep a regular beat, and you can easily do it with your fingers, the students get caught up in it. And that's why we do the choral repetition quite a lot. And chants are also good. Now, if you look at this on the face of it, okay, there are 4 words in each line, okay? But English is a stress-timed language. And what that means is that the main stress is at irregular intervals when you're saying things. So the hi, how are you? Both parts take the same amount of time to say. So the interval between those 2 main stresses is regular. And that means that the unstressed ones, they're irregular. they don't often take the same amount of time to say. And if you notice about this one, there's a lot of linking involved. How are you? All three words of those are linked. So if I say each of these, it will take me the same amount of time to say, hi, how are you? Fine, how are you? Hi, how are you? Fine, how are you? And all I'm doing is varying the stress on the how are you. Okay, it's mild. Another good exercise to do is dialogue deletion. Okay, so this all helps with the fluency and linking things together and things like the stress, and especially the word stress and sentence stress. So can I help you? I'd like an ice cream, please. So you have two sides of the room, a side A and a side B. You get them to replicate the dialogue, and slowly you start deleting bits of it. So they're not reading things. And by the end of a few turns, they don't have the dialogue in front of them. And then they're just saying it, and it becomes more natural and it becomes more fluent in that as well. And finally, we've got a few minutes left. Looking at the middle and secondary students, so the higher grades, you can get into things like chunking. Okay, so chunking is just splitting some text into manageable parts. Okay, so if we have a text like this, it's good just to take a couple of sentences and wipe out the punctuation. Then play a recording and see, can they actually guess where the pauses are? Because where the pauses are is where the thing is chunked together.
Does it really matter whether people speak with an accent as long as they can be easily understood? Many people now believe that in an increasingly globalized world, we should accept variations in pronunciation, that is, accent. However, there's no point in speaking with an accent if people can't understand you, is there?
So if you do something as simple as this, all I've taken is some text from one of our books and I've wiped out the punctuation. And then I've just done the audio of that and I've said, where does the speaker pause? Because wherever she paused, that's where you group words together, and they're called thought groups or chunks. So it's a good idea to do on these read alouds, obviously pronouncing words correctly. Those are the consonant and vowel sounds. But can they chunk the language into thought groups? And when we're doing it from our material, a big giveaway is the punctuation. So they can initially follow the punctuation, okay, and then use appropriate stress and intonation, and de-emphasize things like grammar words. So if we take the second sentence here, it says, in contrast, punctuation point, you pause. Even plants that are thousands of years old continue to grow new needles. Now that's in between the two commas there, but within that, it's up to me. What do I stress? Okay, how do I group those words together? There's not a hard and fast rule. You could do anything you actually want. Okay, so when we're doing repeating text, okay, especially for higher grades, this goes a little bit further. And a good way to practice this is to get into increasing levels of complexity and repeat a sentence in different ways. So if I do this, I could emphasize any one of these four words. I could say, staff, make notes available. Staff make notes available. Staff make notes available. Staff make notes available. So I said that in four different ways. Okay, and what we're saying is, okay, my intention is different in each of those. So if you get a base sentence, and you can have a go at this while you listen to this, okay, every new part, try and stress that. So in this case, teaching staff make notes available. Teaching staff make their notes available. Most teaching staff make their notes available. Most teaching staff make their lecture notes available. Most teaching staff make their lecture notes available online. So this is a simple way to get, especially the higher grades, to change the meaning of what they tend to say. Okay, and you can do it with anything. You know, you can start off with two-word sentences like this. Okay, up to you what you want to emphasize. You can put a little phrase in there. You don't keep having to add one particular word. Okay, and it's a good way to practice these things. So when we talk about suprasegmental skills, we're talking about chunking, And after each chunk, you pause momentarily, and that will influence the intonation. Okay. And when we're talking about intonation, essentially in English, you either have a falling intonation, and that's done a lot for WH questions, okay, right at the end of that. Also for statements, you can have a rising one when we're questioning something, or yes-no questions as well, or you can have a rise-fall one. Okay? And this is the most difficult thing for students to overcome when they're doing pronunciation. And this is where it helps to have an environment of it. Or if you are a native speaker and you can help, that helps as well, because this is really difficult for students to do. Where to do the rising and falling intonation. I've put one example here, but you could do anything. Okay, the words I've underlined and highlighted, I'm saying I'm going to stress them, but it's not to say that's the only way to do these sorts of things. Okay. So remember to give students lots of ideas for practice. They can do this from our material. We've got lots of stories there, so they can do reading chunks from a storybook, even from those biographies in the literature readers, even an ordinary newspaper or magazine article or an online one. Just get a paragraph and do all the rules that we've done. Asking them to do it in front of a mirror is good for those articulators, rather like we did those shouting dictations. Okay. YouTube, we've got a lot of documentary videos with the subtitles on as well. So that's really good for them to listen to because they can see it with the subtitles and the transcript on. Obviously, we have a lot of recording devices both within our app, but they can use their mobiles as well. That's the best way to figure out, are they pausing? Are they stressing? Is the stress correct? Are they linking? Okay, and the important thing is those stresses and de-stresses. Okay, I was going to do an audio, but that doesn't matter. Okay, finally, okay, last thing we'll do, if you want to practice everything, okay, the best way to practice everything we've talked about today is to do a limerick. And a limerick is simply something that follows a rhyming scheme. Okay, so if we count the number of syllables in these lines, okay, can you tell me how many syllables are in each line? What's the rhyming scheme on this one? Last thing we'll do, so if you can just put it in the chat, how many syllables in each of these lines? Lots of people are thanking me. This is the last thing I'll do. It's only a minute. Okay, if you can put the number of syllables. Let's see. I think everybody wants their cup of tea. Okay, 9. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's the first one. Okay, Lydia. Okay, I think you've got it. Okay, you're the first person to get it. So well done, Lydia. Okay, 99669. And this is the best way to practice simply because if you don't follow all the rules we've said, okay, the last line will sound incorrect. Okay, so just to finish off with, I'll read it. You can have a go with me. And does your last line sound correct? So a food taster who hailed from Torquay didn't like sweet corn mixed with his peas. It made him feel queasy, distinctly uneasy, and thus made him quadruple his fees. So if you don't follow all the rules we talked about today, that last line will not sound correct and in rhythm. Okay, so there we will finish it. So, okay. Why the word teacher is included in monophthong. I don't think you have to use monophthong. And triphthongs are just like obviously triplicates of that. Okay, but remember this was a foundation in phonetics. Okay, so I know there's some linguists amongst you, but we don't want to get into too much detail on that. As Suresh, that's an interesting one. As English is the most unphonetic language, it's not the most unphonetic language if you're used to the script and you do phonetics. Okay, so if you ask Europeans, they wouldn't agree with you. Maybe if you're looking at South Asian languages, you can say that because your language is syllable timed, not stressed. So there's no right and wrong way. There's many ways to do it, but that's why we have linguistic courses. Okay, tongue issues, that's the speech impediment, Ankita. And obviously there's exceptions to everything, but that's where the speech therapist comes in. Okay. And Unathi, how to clear the C and K sound at an early stage to students. That's where the phonemic chart comes in. Okay, because if you just go on, just do the alphabet and do the phonemes, if you do the graphemes, the physical representation, the visual representation of phonemes, it's quite easy for students to do that. But I think you'll be concentrating on phonics and doing the reading. But if you just show them the phonetic symbols for the C and K, I think that will help you, and do words and choose one syllable words and maybe put it at the beginning and the end of the word, but not in the middle. Okay, and just to finish with, Sai Barakavi, what is the order to teach phonetics? There, I mentioned it earlier, there is no order. It's what works for you. I told you what I did on my teach training, but you could do it reverse way. Where do your students make the most mistakes? Okay, if it was me, I would do it the same way as I did on my teach training. I would do the consonant pairings of voiced and unvoiced. I would do the other consonants because it's not so much of a leap for students looking at the alphabet and then the graphemes with the consonants. And then I would do the long vowel sounds, the single vowels, and leave diphthongs to it. Okay. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Remember, if you've registered, you'll get a webinar certificate. And if you missed any of this, it will be available on our YouTube channel in about an hour or so, or maybe Monday. Actually, it has to be downloaded. So maybe Monday will be available on our YouTube channel. Thanks, Mina, for all the help. Okay.
Thank you, Cal.
Have a good afternoon, everybody.